India's luxury car market is experiencing a growth spurt. Sales have skyrocketed, driven by a younger, wealthier clientele.
The Bharat Mobility Expo has kicked off in the national capital with a bang. Yes, you had 34 vehicle OEMs participating, more than 100 vehicle launches taking place here at the Pragati Maidan.
While Tesla keeps promising cheaper electric cars and Chinese companies flood the market with expensive models, India just dropped a bombshell that nobody saw coming. A brand new electric vehicle priced at just $2,999 is now sending shockwaves through the entire global car industry. This is about being smart, practical, and built right in India. How did a small startup manage to create something that billion-dollar companies couldn't?
Charging up India's EV journey. India is racing towards a greener future, and electric vehicles are at the heart of that transformation.
What makes this tiny car so special that the whole world is now paying attention? Let's get into this incredible story that's about to change how we think about electric cars forever. The unexpected rise of India's electric dreams. Just 3 years ago, when car experts talked about electric vehicles, India wasn't even mentioned. All eyes were on China with their fancy factories, Germany with their luxury brands, and America with Tesla making headlines every week. India was dealing with expensive fuel, terrible traffic, and roads that weren't ready for modern cars. But something amazing started happening behind the scenes. The Indian government began supporting electric vehicles with money and policies. People slowly started buying electric scooters instead of petrol ones. Cities like Mumbai and Delhi saw quiet electric bikes replacing noisy gas engines on their streets. The change started small. Local companies like Ola, Ather, and TVS began selling electric scooters. At first, only tech-savvy people in big cities bought them. But soon, even people in smaller towns started choosing electric over petrol. Then, the four-wheeler revolution began. Tata Motors launched small electric cars that normal families could afford. Mahindra joined in. Even international brands like MG and Hyundai started selling electric cars in India. People realized that electric vehicles were real and available right now. But nobody expected what happened next. While Tesla kept talking about making a $25,000 car for regular people and Chinese companies kept building expensive models, a tiny Indian startup called Yakuza Auto was working on something completely different. They weren't trying to build the fastest or the fanciest car, they were trying to build the most practical one. The Yakuza Mini EV isn't trying to be a luxury car. It doesn't have fancy autopilot features or massive touchscreens. It doesn't promise to drive itself or park automatically. What it does promise is something much more important, reliable transportation that regular people can actually buy. This small electric car costs just $2,999, which is about 175,000 rupees in Indian money. It has 4 wheels, comfortable seats for 4 people, and a battery that can travel over 100 kilometers on a single charge. For people living in cities, students going to college, delivery workers, and small families, it gives exactly what they need without any unnecessary extras. The timing couldn't be better. As fuel prices keep rising around the world and pollution becomes a bigger problem every day, people desperately need cars that are small, reliable, and don't harm the environment. But most importantly, they need cars they can afford. That's exactly what Yakuza Auto delivered. It's a real car being built in real factories using Indian materials, Indian workers, and Indian designs. It's made for Indian roads, but its impact is being felt around the world. The car became an instant sensation. News channels across the globe started asking the same questions. How is this possible? How can a fully electric car cost so little? Is it safe? Will people actually buy it? The answer lies in understanding how this car is actually built and why India's approach is so different from everyone else's. The secret behind the impossible price tag. While big car companies spend billions on robot factories and complicated supply chains, Yakuza Auto took a completely different path. They asked a simple question: what does a city driver really need? The answer was surprisingly basic: a safe vehicle that can get from point A to point B without breaking the bank. Instead of trying to compete with Tesla's high-tech features or BMW's luxury interiors, Yakuza focused on the essentials. They stripped away the expensive touchscreens, heated seats, panoramic sunroofs, and entertainment systems that most people never really use anyway. What remained was a clean, simple machine that understood its purpose perfectly. The real genius was in how they built it. Where other companies invested heavily in expensive robotic assembly lines and global shipping networks, Yakuza chose a different strategy. They used skilled Indian workers, set up smaller regional factories, and sourced materials locally whenever possible. This approach didn't require billion-dollar investments or complex international partnerships. The decentralized manufacturing model meant they could build cars closer to where people actually live. Instead of shipping parts from different continents and assembling them in one giant factory, they created a network of smaller production units across India. This not only reduced costs, but also created jobs in multiple cities and towns. They also made smart choices about the battery. Instead of using expensive imported batteries, they partnered with Indian companies to develop lithium iron phosphate batteries that were both affordable and reliable. These batteries might not have the longest range in the world, but they have enough power for daily city driving, which is what most people actually need. The design philosophy was equally practical. The car has high ground clearance to handle Indian roads, simple mechanical systems that local mechanics can repair, and replaceable parts that don't require specialized tools or training. Every decision was made with one goal in mind: making electric transportation accessible to regular people. The Indian market provided the perfect testing ground for this new approach to electric vehicles. Cities like Mumbai, Delhi, and Bangalore are packed with narrow streets, impossible parking situations, and traffic that moves at a snail's pace most of the time. A giant luxury car might look impressive, but it's completely impractical in these conditions. The Yakuza Mini EV, on the other hand, was designed specifically for this environment. It's small enough to slip through tight spaces, light enough to handle speed bumps and potholes, and efficient enough to make multiple trips without needing a charge. For delivery workers, small business owners, and families living in crowded neighborhoods, it was exactly what they needed. Early buyers were impressed by how well the car understood their daily lives. Parents could drop their kids at school and still have enough battery to run errands. College students could drive to classes without worrying about fuel costs. Small shop owners could transport goods without renting expensive vehicles. The car's success in India proved something important. Innovation doesn't always mean adding more features. Sometimes it means understanding what people really need and delivering it in the simplest way possible. While other car companies were focused on impressing tech reviewers and winning design awards, Yakuza was focused on solving real problems for real people. Word spread quickly through social media and local communities. People started sharing videos of their daily drives, calculating how much money they were saving on fuel, and recommending the car to friends and family. The organic growth was incredible. No expensive advertising campaigns or celebrity endorsements, just satisfied customers telling their stories. As news of this success reached international markets, global car companies started paying serious attention. The global wake-up call that shook Detroit and beyond. When news outlets in America and Europe first reported on a fully electric car selling for under $3,000, many people thought it was a mistake or a scam. How could any real car cost less than most people spend on their smartphones? But as more details emerged, the international auto industry realized they were looking at something genuinely disruptive. Car executives in Detroit, Stuttgart, and Tokyo started asking uncomfortable questions. If a small Indian startup could build a functional electric vehicle for $2,999, what excuse did billion-dollar companies have for charging $30,000 or more? Industry analysts began publishing research papers trying to understand Yakuza's business model and whether it could be replicated in other markets. The response from established carmakers was mixed. Some dismissed the Yakuza as a basic vehicle that couldn't compete with their advanced features and superior build quality. Others recognized it as a serious threat to their business models, especially in developing markets where price matters more than prestige. Tesla, which had promised to build a $25,000 car for years without delivering, suddenly faced questions about why their cheapest model still cost more than 8 times as much as the Yakuza. Chinese companies like BYD, which had focused on scaling up production to reduce costs, realized that scale alone wasn't enough. They needed to rethink their entire approach to affordability. The automotive press began comparing the Yakuza phenomenon to other disruptive innovations in history. How smartphones disrupted traditional phones, how streaming services disrupted cable TV, and how ride-sharing disrupted taxi companies. The common thread was always the same. Successful disruption comes from understanding what customers really want, not what companies think they should want. International trade delegations started visiting India to study the Yakuza model firsthand. Government officials from countries struggling with urban pollution and transportation costs wanted to understand if this approach could work in their markets too. The little car from India was becoming a global case study in frugal innovation. For any electric car to succeed, it needs places to charge. A few years ago, this was India's biggest challenge. People worried about where they would plug in their cars, how long it would take, and what would happen during power outages. But today, the landscape looks completely different. Thousands of charging stations are being installed across India every month, not just in major cities like Delhi and Mumbai, but in smaller towns and cities where most Indians actually live. Shopping malls now have charging spots in their parking lots. Office buildings offer charging as a perk for employees. Metro stations, highway rest stops, and even residential neighborhoods are getting their own charging infrastructure. The charging technology is getting smarter too. Fast charging stations can power up a Yakuza Mini EV in just a few hours, while slower overnight chargers work perfectly for people who can plug in at home or work. The variety of options means that range anxiety is becoming less of a concern for most drivers. What makes this even more impressive is the source of the electricity. India is rapidly expanding its renewable energy capacity, with massive solar farms in Rajasthan and wind power projects in Tamil Nadu. This means that electric cars are increasingly powered by clean energy from the sun and wind. The government has been crucial in making this happen. Programs like the National Electric Mobility Mission and various state-level incentives have provided financial support for both charging infrastructure and vehicle purchases. Reduced taxes on electric vehicles and subsidies for manufacturers have made the entire ecosystem more viable. Even Indian Railways has joined the movement by installing charging stations at train stations. Public bus fleets are converting to electric. Delivery companies like Zomato and Swiggy are replacing their petrol bikes with electric ones. The entire transportation ecosystem is shifting, and cars like the Yakuza Mini EV are both benefiting from and contributing to this transformation. This infrastructure boom is changing not just how people travel, but how they think about car ownership itself. The cultural shift from luxury to necessity. The success of the Yakuza Mini EV reflects a deeper change in how Indians think about cars. For previous generations, owning a car was a symbol of success and status. People saved for years to buy their first car, often choosing the biggest and most impressive model they could afford. But today's generation sees cars differently. Young professionals care more about convenience and sustainability than showing off. Parents want reliable transportation for their families without the ongoing cost of fuel and maintenance. Retired people prefer quiet, simple vehicles for their daily errands. This shift in mindset has created the perfect market for the Yakuza approach. Instead of selling dreams of luxury and status, they're selling practical solutions to real problems. Instead of competing on horsepower and top speed, they're competing on affordability and efficiency. The environmental aspect is also becoming more important to Indian consumers. Air pollution in major cities has reached crisis levels, and people are increasingly aware of their personal contribution to the problem. Insurance companies have started offering better rates for electric vehicles, recognizing their lower risk of accidents and mechanical problems. Banks are providing easier loans for electric car purchases. The Yakuza Mini EV has become a symbol of a new way of thinking about transportation. It represents the idea that you don't need to spend a fortune to get around cleanly and efficiently. You don't need to compromise your values to meet your practical needs. The story of the Yakuza Mini EV isn't staying within India's borders. Countries across Africa, Southeast Asia, and South America are paying close attention to what's happening and wondering if they can replicate this success in their own markets. In Africa, where many countries struggle with expensive fuel imports and limited public transportation, the idea of an affordable electric vehicle is particularly attractive. Governments in Kenya, Nigeria, and Ghana have already begun discussions about importing or licensing the Yakuza design for local assembly. The car's simple design and local manufacturing approach make it ideal for adaptation to different markets. The high ground clearance works well on unpaved roads. The replaceable battery system means that maintenance can be handled locally without expensive imported parts. The basic electrical systems can be repaired by mechanics who don't need specialized training. South American countries are also interested, particularly those with growing urban populations and increasing environmental concerns. The ability to customize the car for local conditions makes it appealing to governments looking for affordable transportation solutions. But the impact goes beyond just exporting cars. The Yakuza model is inspiring local entrepreneurs in other countries to think differently about manufacturing and innovation. Instead of trying to compete with global brands on their terms, they're asking what their own communities really need and how they can deliver it affordably. This represents a fundamental shift in how innovation happens. For decades, new technologies flowed from wealthy countries to developing ones. Cars, phones, computers, and other products were designed in Silicon Valley, Germany, or Japan, then adapted for other markets. But the Yakuza shows how innovation can flow in the opposite direction, from developing countries to the rest of the world. The environmental implications of this shift could be enormous, but that's just the beginning of the story. The challenge to global giants. The success of the Yakuza Mini EV poses a direct challenge to every major automotive company in the world. If a small startup can build a functional electric vehicle for under $3,000, what excuse do billion-dollar corporations have for their high prices? Some companies are already responding. Volkswagen has announced plans for a low-cost electric vehicle specifically for developing markets. General Motors is exploring simplified designs that could reduce manufacturing costs. Even luxury brands like BMW are studying the Yakuza model to understand how they might create more affordable offerings. But the challenge goes deeper than just pricing. The Yakuza approach requires a fundamental rethinking of business models, supply chains, and corporate priorities. Companies that have spent decades building complex global operations might find it difficult to embrace the simplicity and local focus that makes Yakuza successful. There's also the question of whether consumers in wealthy countries would accept the trade-offs that make the Yakuza so affordable. Americans and Europeans are used to cars with advanced safety features, powerful engines, and luxury interiors. Would they be willing to drive something as basic as the Yakuza Mini EV? The answer might depend on changing attitudes toward consumption and environmental responsibility. As climate change becomes more urgent and economic inequality grows, more people might prioritize practical solutions over status symbols. The success of companies like IKEA, which built a global business on affordable, functional design, suggests there's definitely a market for this approach. As the Yakuza Mini EV gains international attention, the company faces the challenge of scaling their model without losing what makes it special. Growing from a local startup to a global operation requires careful balance between expansion and maintaining their core philosophy. The manufacturing approach that works well in India might need adaptation for different markets. Labor costs, regulatory requirements, and consumer preferences vary significantly between countries, and the company will need to remain flexible while staying true to their principles. There's also the question of how to maintain quality and safety standards as production increases. The automotive industry has strict requirements for crash testing, emissions, and reliability that become more complex when operating across multiple countries and regulatory systems. Technology evolution presents both opportunities and challenges. As battery technology improves and costs continue to fall, the Yakuza could offer longer range and better performance while maintaining its price advantage. But the company will need to resist the temptation to add expensive features that might compromise their affordability mission. Competition is also intensifying. Other companies are studying the Yakuza model and working on their own ultra-low-cost electric vehicles. Chinese manufacturers, with their experience in scaling production and reducing costs, represent a particular threat. The company that innovated by ignoring conventional wisdom now needs to stay ahead of competitors who are learning from their example. The Yakuza Mini EV is rewriting the rules of innovation itself. By focusing on what people actually need instead of what companies want to sell, this little car from India is proving that real progress comes from understanding real problems. While billion-dollar companies chase high-tech dreams, Yakuza choose to chase human needs, and in doing so, they might have just shown us the future of transportation. What do you think about this approach to making cars? Could this simple philosophy change how we think about innovation in other industries too? Share your thoughts in the comments below.